It was the quiet, frosty morning of Epiphany, January the 6th, the day when the calendar whispers that the festivities must finally come to an end and the house must return to order. The holiday lights that had burned so brightly for weeks were dark, and the great pine tree in the corner stood with slumped shoulders, looking tired, dry, and ready for its winter rest. Ilona stood before the wall calendar, her finger tracing the date with a heavy, nostalgic sigh, knowing that tradition is tradition and the season of sparkling lights had passed. Just then, Marek bustled into the room, rolling up the sleeves of his embroidered shirt and carrying a large wooden crate with the confident swagger of a man who believed this task would take 10 minutes. Tops. But the cottage had a third resident who had not been consulted on this matter, for deep within the drying, prickly branches, Jinx the cat had established his fortress, his green eyes glowing from the shadows of the needles like a jungle tiger. When Ilona reached for the first red glass bauble, a swift orange paw swatted her hand away, declaring that the tree was still occupied territory, and it took a high-stakes negotiation involving a bag of fishy treats, shaken loudly by the kitchen door, to finally bribe the guardian from his post, sending him zooming away in a blur of fur. With the cat gone, the work began. Piece by piece, the glass stars, the wooden angels, and the walnuts wrapped in gold foil were wrapped in soft paper and tucked away into the darkness of the crate, until the tree stood completely bare, a skeleton of wood and memories, surrounded by a carpet of fallen brown needles. "Time to go," Marek announced, gripping the trunk with his strong hands to lift it. But the tree did not budge an inch, as if it had grown roots to the floorboards, into the very earth beneath the house. His fingers became glued together with amber-colored sticky sap, and he grumbled in frustration until Ilona stepped in, wrapping her arms around his waist for a mighty tug-of-war that ended with a loud crack as the tree finally popped loose, lurching sideways and nearly knocking over Ilona's favorite flower vase, which she caught with the reflexes of a goalkeeper. Then began the great battle of the doorframe. It remains a mystery of the universe, how a tree that slid in so easily weeks ago could suddenly become 3 times wider than the door on the way out. They pushed the base, but it jammed. They pulled the top, but the dry branches splayed open like a stubborn umbrella, clinging desperately to the warmth of the living room and refusing to enter the cold. With Marek's face pressed into the prickly branches and a final desperate shout of "Push!" the tree gave up the fight, exploding in a massive cloud of dry dust and flying needles that showered them both as they tumbled out into the snowbank. Lying there in the cold, fresh air, looking more like pine cones than people, they couldn't help but laugh as their breath formed clouds in the winter sun. But the tree's journey was not over. They stood it upright in the garden, planting it firmly in the snow, and Ilona dressed its branches not with glass, but with dried apple slices and seeds. When a little red bird landed to feast, bringing a flash of color to the white landscape, even Jinx watched from the window, chattering his teeth in approval of the new arrangement. Back inside, the cottage felt strangely spacious and quiet. The corner was empty, leaving a void where the magic had been. Marek swept the floor vigorously, chasing every last needle into the dustpan, but the tree had left one final prank. Marek sat down on his stool and lifted his foot to reveal that his thick, hand-knitted wool sock had turned into a pincushion, forcing him to pluck them out one by one with a grimace. Finally, the floor was clean, the socks were dethorned, and they stood in the middle of the room looking around. "But where is the cat?" Ilona asked, realizing the house was too quiet. They looked under the table, they looked near the stove, but he was nowhere to be seen. It wasn't until they turned back to the corner that they saw him. There was Jinx, sitting in the exact center of the empty space where the tree used to be, curled up on his cushion with a peaceful expression, the king of the ghost tree, proving that while the decorations may be gone, the spirit of the home remains exactly where it belongs.